Hi there. My name is Leif Bragerson. I'm very proud to have a chance to introduce to you Robert Proudfoot. He is a self-published author, born and raised in Edmonton. Robert had his life enriched by cross-cultural experiences in Africa when, during the early 1970s, he completed high school and studied at the University of Zambia. He later worked as an agroforester in Nigeria from 1988 to 1991. As an environmental scientist, Robert writes technical documents, but he also follows his passion for creative writing. Aside from self publishing in 2019, Enduring Art, Active Fact, Three Generations Create, a collection of poetry, short stories, essays, and artwork created by three generations of his family, Robert published 35 essays in various church, community, or professional magazines since 1980. He also researched and wrote the historical backgrounder for a DVD commemorating First Mennonite Church's 50th anniversary in 2009. We're going to have a reading from Robert from his book, and Robert will read for a few minutes. We'll have a chance to answer any questions you have afterwards. Any questions you have, you can put them in the chat, and we'll get to them at the appropriate time. And so, without further ado, I give you Robert Proudfoot.
Okay, hello everybody, and good morning or good evening wherever you are in the world. I am honored to be able to read from my book for you. The book I'm going to read from is actually my third book. It's called Come By Here, My Lord, Seen in a Mirror Dimly. And it talks about the era in Southern Africa during the early 1970s. It's a novel set in that period. And it celebrates the friendships that were possible between people across racial boundaries and ethnic boundaries and religious boundaries and also the socioeconomic boundaries. And the story takes place in Lusaka, Zambia. And it explores the coming of age of a young expatriate Canadian man named Orwell Hughes. He has a father named Bwana James Hughes. He invites a friend to help him with some of the struggles he's having. His life is pretty good, but he also has struggles. He suffers from racism and also has awkward social relationships. And he invites his friend from Edmonton named Tracy McDonaghy to come and help him solve some of the problems. Tracy comes at Easter time with his sisters, Alicia and Kathleen. They stay longer than expected. They are not as the family remembered from 5 years previous when they left to go to Africa. And so the McDonaghys basically turn Orwell's life upside down. He has an idyllic life and they force him to confront different realities. But Orwell and his family are also able to teach the McDonaghys about the value of embracing and engaging the other, which would be people that are of color, people of maybe different ideas, people of social status that's different. The Hughes family makes a real concerted effort while they're in Zambia to have a cross-cultural living with Africans. Okay, so I'm going to read from chapter 20, verses, pages 27 to 31. It's about a party at the Hughes house for the McDonaghys when they come to Africa. Soon, young people were milling about under a starry sky on the back deck, giggling and chatting among the lava lamps and many candles flickering within the multi-colored lanterns. At first, bold downbeat of rock and roll music, Orwell and Richard, who's Orwell's brother, assumed that they could take their adorable female partners onto the dance floor to enjoy a private fling. But Africans shied away from such intimacy, preferring instead to dance artistically within their genders or as one large enthusiastic group. Georgina gently took Alicia by the hand and bid her shy friend to dance beside her, while Cephas and Benjamin cavorted with Orwell. At times, Orwell's chaps moved fluidly around Alicia. She found herself in sights of shyly grinning David or enthusiastically shaking Solomon. Whenever the big cats moved on, moseyed about the JJ or Georgina. Susanna and Ali preferred one another's company, as did Richard and Kathleen, but each couple jovially mingled as everyone danced together to the rhythmic reggae beat supplied by Ali's ghetto blaster. Orwell marveled at how his friends gravitated to Alicia. He found himself grinning and strutting his stuff for want of her pleasure too, as they also took opportunities to come together. Her forlorn desire was passé now, as carefree Alicia frolicked barefoot with all around. Georgina, however, sensed their special camaraderie. Taking charge, the vixen drew Orwell away and requested he put on pounding, nonstop dance music she had brought to the party. Battle of the bands ensued between the Beach Boys, Beatles, and Rolling Stones. Vivacious Miss Amadou became the featured dancer for all to applaud and learn from as she interpreted Mungo Jerry's In the Summertime with high octane energy. Taking a well-earned rest at last from polishing the dance floor, the young people shared tea and crumpets in the warm glow of the parlor. Their fellowship was refueled when Mrs. Hughes brought out a delicious platter of barbecued meats, complete with bread and the trimmings of garden vegetables. A local game called Ayo, a backgammon-like caper involving the strategic movement of small, smooth stones across two sets of bowls, was introduced by Solomon. Cephas was versed in playing the balafon, a guard xylophone, as was David with the thumb piano, both of which were decoratively stationed about the room. JJ and Alicia shook flamboyant pod rattles in accompaniment as they let down their long hair enough to help churn out a set of ancient tribal songs on instruments that had been purchased by their hosts as exotic tourist curios. The normally reserved Canucks became buoyantly coaxed by Ben into attempting the fancy footwork of a popular tribal dance. This cultural exchange ran its course as people swayed and stepped softly to the rolling, bubbly circles to David's eerie chants and the rhythmic beat of Solomon's hand drum. They took turns singing folk songs and sacred hymns to the accompaniment of Orwell's piano, Susie's auto harp, Alicia's violin, JJ's flute, and Kathleen's guitar, which in a spirit of cooperation she shared with Benjamin, who then strummed his own fine music. At Georgina's request, Ben led the group in a melodious rendition of Kumbaya, My Lord. Seated on the couch between two exotically beautiful women who loved and were loved by him, Alicia singing, laughing, and clapping her hands, and Georgina smiling contentedly as she lay with her head upon his shoulder. Orwell could not have wished for a better party, save for Tracy to also be in attendance to savor the festivities with him. As the Westminster clock chimed 10, JJ came up with a crazy party game that squeezed the last ounce of energy from the mellow group of satisfied tiredness. Asking puckishly for a clever volunteer and choosing dapper Ali as the obvious candidate, JJ gave this suave globetrotter a photograph to memorize, but not, she sternly instructed, to share with anyone else. The ring mistress directed her victim to lie on the floor while Alicia draped him in an iconic Hudson Bay blanket. JJ then invited the stupefied audience to guess what was the mystery object depicted in Ali's photo. The performer must stay shrouded and sworn to silence, but he could nod, shake his head, or act out his answer to any question asked.
Are the rules of this charade clear enough? Asked the tiny MC with booming energy. When everybody on both sides of the blanket nodded politely, JJ christened the game to start with a hearty bon voyage. The game started politely, if not awkwardly, as the audience fiddled about asking appropriate yet strategic, close-ended questions. Some folks thought if they could concentrate hard enough on remembering all the details, they would see the photograph in their minds, if not somehow steal it from Ali's shrouded person. Cephas suddenly broke ranks when he laughed at the clownish, burrowing shaman king. Georgina glared and clacked her tongue at Bellow's bizarre amusement, then murmured her concern that Orwell take charge lest her brother suffocate inside his heavy wraps. Orwell, knowing this high intrigue was meant only to be a friendly parlor game, shattered the tense air by shouting out strategic yes-no question. Mr. Ali, does your photograph depict something live? When the shrouded figure nodded vigorously, causing Georgina to gasp as he generated snaps of static electricity, Orwell smartly followed up. Is your creature a plant? Ali shook his head, then repeated this gesture more emphatically when Richard jumped in. Are you a two-legged animal? A person, perchance? Is it a four-legged animal? Inquired Alicia, looking like a scientist now with her heavy glasses on. She was well aware from biology class that insects had 6 legs, spiders skittered about on 8 legs, and some creepy crawlers moved on dozens of limbs until caught and eaten by the locals for dietary protein. Kathleen scowled unimpressed and gave her sister an F for asking such a dumb question when the game was on the line for the boys to win. Like, yeah, get with the program already, Fanny. Of course, it's obviously a 4-legged animal. We have to get snappy here. Cut to the chase. Mr. Ali, do you have a picture of a wild animal? I was getting there, kitty cat. I have narrow down the options. Play the games intelligently, Alicia muttered aside to her sister. Ali, as though to prove her strategic point, nodded vigorously before grabbing Alicia's leg and using it to lumber about on 5 legs. He extended the extra limb in the air and tried to pull down something huge. Alicia, dragged like a rag doll about the floor, shrieked that Ali was somehow a famished alien who would drag her underneath the blanket to eat. She guffawed and squirmed until he released her. As Alicia desperately clambered to her feet, but gave her sister a stern, wild look. Kathleen, striving to concentrate on and guess ahead of Richard and Orwell, waved Alicia off like she was some hyperactive child. Does this animal live in Africa? Demanded the Hughes brothers enthusiastically together. When Ali nodded, Georgina flashed Orwell a zesty grin, impressed that he was so animated, engaged. He was the life of the party. Ali failed to respond immediately. He suddenly fell miserably behind. He sat slumped like a sad sack. Was he deeply the fusillade of questions? Was he getting too hot and tired? Or was his brain finally fried? Cephas found Ali's humbling predicament utterly hilarious. He so enjoyed the buzz of questions flying around that he saw no need to whip up any of his own to throw at his faltering nemesis. Is it a pet? Suzanne asked girlishly, provoking laughter from the others. Cephas practically fell off his seat at what he thought was a preposterous supposition and rolled on the floor, laughing uproariously now as Ali vigorously negated the silly idea like one who felt totally insulted. The audience giggled with amused dismay at Cephas' clowning antics, but Ali, provoked by this rude heckler, gained his second wind and responded enthusiastically to Kathleen's musing that he was a large game animal, like a lion or an elephant. Ali assumed a kneeling position, hunched his shoulders and outstretched curved arms below his head to form tusks. He laboriously dug at the floor until his knees gave way when tangled in the blanket. I know, brother, you're acting like an elephant. There must be an elephant in that photo, shrieked Georgina with delight. Ali threw off his sweltering wraps and roundly congratulated her worthy guess. His relieved to be free from the confinement of the out and far outweighing any bitterness of having lost his secret, Ali bounded over to present his crumpled photo to Georgina, who was celebrating her clever win with Orwell and Alicia. Ali glistened with sweat, and his voice was raspy as he exclaimed, "You are absolutely correct, my dear. Well done. Fabulous. How did you manage it?" "I figured it out," I chortled Georgina triumphantly as she flashed the prized photograph of the huge gray pachyderm bearing gleamy ivory tusks and a curling trunk as it grazed upon succulent tree shoots in the cool of the day at her subdued rivals, Kathleen, Suzanne, and Richard. "I won the game." And I think I'm going to stop here.
Thanks, Robert. You put a lot of descriptions of a lot of cultural things in there that were really interesting. Did you encounter when you were in Africa? Did you go for parties with people that were local and people that were from other places and all that stuff?
Yeah, when I was at the University of Zambia as a student, I did go to parties like that, and both at the university, and we hosted a party at our house before I left, and numerous people from the university came to that party, and as well as Canadian friends, and it was. But I mean, when I was at the international school, it was the high school. There was one or two Zambian students in the whole school. Like,
okay.
It was kind of an odd situation. Like there was, even though Zambia was an independent country, it seemed that expatriates and Zambians didn't really mix that well in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And the international school happened to be a private school. If we had, say, gone to a national government school, we would have been probably the only white people in that school.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how stark it was. But the University of Zambia, I was able to go to parties and enjoy people. And as a minority, I was a visible minority, but I was able to meet.
So what prompted you initially to write about your experiences in Africa?
Well, for me, I appreciated the time that I lived there. It wasn't easy living there in early 1970s. There were a lot of racial tensions happening. Like in 1974, the Portuguese, who had colonies right adjacent to Zambia on east and west, they just packed it up and left.
Yep.
They had a coup in their country, and the government of 50 years fell. And so they just left, and just turned the colonies over to local politicians. And then, like in South Africa and Rhodesia, which was now Zimbabwe, they were countries that Zambia was enemies with. Zambia was opposed to apartheid and racism and colonialism, and so I was just trying to capture that time. Like that was when I was in my late teens, coming towards 20, and I wanted to speak about those experiences. And honestly, the more I live, I see that there's a lot of similarities between Canada and Southern Africa of that era.
Oh yeah.
There was a lot of like people in Zambia were more free to meet and visit and that, but there was still a lot of separation of races, and I see that in Canada too, and especially with Indigenous people, like how they've been kept down for generations by the colonial attitude of the Canadian government. Like it wasn't much different from the apartheid in South Africa at the time, and so I wanted to bring that idea out. I feel that Canada needs to get its act together, and Canada needs to change. Canada needs to become more inclusive, and I talk about it in this book to some degree.
trying to setting those ideas up. And so that was the other reason for writing it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So do you have any favorite authors you might recommend that would also talk about the African experience, or?
Well, Alan Paton was somebody that he wrote the story Cry the Beloved Country about South Africa during the apartheid era.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that story. I also appreciated some of Chinua Achebe's writing. He was a Nigerian author.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote about the Nigeria during the colonial era as well as later. Wole Soyinka was another Nigerian author.
Mm-hmm.
He actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Yeah.
There was quite a few authors. Florence Nwapa.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which country she was from now, but I mentioned her in my book earlier, because Orwell was somebody that enjoyed being in the Writers Club at the University of Zambia, and he was really into reading about the African authors and their novels and their stories, and so those are some that I can think of right now.
Yeah.
I know there's others, but there's been a lot of authors from Africa.
Now, on the flip side, do you see any Canadian authors, Indigenous authors, perhaps, who you feel gives a good account of the experience of the Indigenous people in Canada?
Yeah, there are authors that I would suggest. The person that wrote like Thomas King, he's not Canadian, he's American, but he's written numerous books about the Indigenous experience. There is a book also that was written by Warren Kinsella, I believe, or no, W.O. Mitchell. W.O. Mitchell about it was called The Vanishing Point. He wrote that.
That's one of his I must have missed. I'm going to have to look that up.
Yeah, he wrote it from the experience of somebody like during the era of the residential school, somebody that was an Indian agent and a kind of an agricultural manager and stuff, and he was a teacher. He was a teacher at this residential school, or not. I don't know if it was a residential school, but it was an Indigenous school on the reserve, and he taught there, and he talked about the differences and what he saw, and like he actually had it. It was a good story. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I picked up a book. I didn't finish reading it, and I don't remember the author. I don't know if you might be able to help me. It was a book about Indigenous people, but it was a book written first of all by archaeologists.
Okay.
But it was a novel, and it was set before the time of colonization, before Europeans actually came to North America, and it was just a purely Indigenous tribe versus tribe kind of a thing, and it was so fascinating just to think of, that how much was here before the Europeans came in and enlightened everybody, so to speak.
Yeah. No, that would be an interesting read, because you would that person probably brought to light a lot of. I mean, these were very advanced societies that were here before the Europeans came here, and there were many more Indigenous people than there are nowadays. Like there are millions across North America, so very diverse, and so no, that would be good. Yeah.
Now, how do you feel about the situation of people who were taken from Africa or immigrated from Africa that now live in a culture that is not culturally sensitive to them? Does that make sense to you?
They were taken. Why were they taken?
I mean, like from hundreds of years ago, when with the cotton farms and things like that. And do you have any? Have you read any books about that experience, or about the American experience for Black people, Africans?
Yes, I've read quite a few books. Yeah, about slavery and even after slavery,
like in some parts of the United States, and even in Canada. Like we had black slaves in Canada at one time as well, and yeah, I mean they've had quite a different experience in life. One of the stories that I really appreciated reading was "To Kill a Mockingbird" by
Harper Lee.
Harper Lee, yes, and she wrote that book in 1960, so that was around the time of the civil rights movement in the States.
Yeah.
But she wrote it like it was based in the 1930s in Alabama, so it was a tough time in the southern U.S. at that time, and so yeah, that was one of the books I enjoyed reading. I
remember reading books like Mississippi Burning. I think there was one came out in the late 80s, Cry Freedom.
Okay.
I saw the movie and read the book, and there was another one. I was really moved by the story of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley, who later wrote the Roots saga.
Yes. Yeah, the Roots series. Like it was a book, but it also became a television series. Yeah, no, that was quite informing to me. Like because that showed how they came. Kunta Kinte was a African man that was just taken by the slave traders and brought to North America, and he was actually, I think, of royal blood, and how he suffered, and then his generations afterwards, how they had to reclaim their independence, and like it was
now, what would you say to a young person who has sort of a lot of romantic dreams of maybe traveling in Africa or studying in Africa? What would you say to a young Canadian person who wanted to follow sort of that route you took there?
Yes, I would say go for it. Like go there and learn. Like I think, like I don't know whether I didn't. My book talks about Zambia, for instance, being quite a advanced nation shortly after independence, and they had a lot to offer. Like they had a good, strong tourist industry. They also had they had a copper mining industry that was second to in the world, I think. And they had a president who was he believed in what they call humanism, where all people are equal and all people matter, and all people, we should care about each other. And so these were values that he taught the people. And Zambia was a fairly peaceful country. I like going. I'm always interested. I'm fascinated by Africa. Like Africa is a very diverse continent, like lots of different cultures, lots of different countries. They all have their own struggles, but they also have, like Nigeria to me was it was very dynamic as a country. Nigeria, I went there in the late 1980s. So 15 years after I left Zambia, I went to Nigeria to work, and I found Nigeria to be quite different. Like there was a lot more people there, but and they also had issues of Christian Muslim kind of conflict, but and they had a civil war. Nigeria never had that. So
we have a question popping up. Would you answer the question? I'll read it out for you. Ken Reining asks, were you working on this novel while on safari with our family in Luangwa Valley, 1972, or was that some of your other literary works?
Okay, well, Ken knows me from that time. Yeah, like,
wow.
That's when I was trying to start it. Like, it took me 30 years to write this book, to get it published, Leaf. Like, I was
Congratulations.
I was writing down my ideas.
It's something that needs to be written.
Probably that era, like when I was in Africa, I was getting my ideas written down and descriptions and all that. But probably that's when I was first working on it. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I recall. I always sort of felt that my first book should be an autobiography, because people like to talk about themselves the most, and that would sort of get me in, but it actually took about like you said, it took decades.
Yeah.
But then once I got my first book written, the experience was so wonderful that I continued to write more, and I hope you do too. I mean, you could. There's so many avenues to explore in these topics you write about.
Yeah.
We
Well,
have another question from Ken Reining. He's asking about what other books you've published.
Okay. Okay. Well, to Ken, this is like the one that I read from. This is the third book I've published. It's called Come By Here, My Lord, Seen in a Mirror Dimly. I wrote a book that I published a book in the summer that was actually my mother's writing. My mother, passed away in 2019, but she wrote a diary about our family's trip to East Africa. We went from Lusaka, Zambia to Nairobi, Kenya. And like we were a family of 9 people, like 7 kids, all under the age of 16. Like I was 15 at a time. And we camped. We were in a Peugeot 404 station wagon. So it was pretty rough living. But my mother wrote that manuscript, then I published it. It's called Amateurs on Safari.
Amateurs on Safari. Cool.
Yeah. And it talks about our journey and what we saw and what my mother saw. It also talks about wildlife, and it talks about some of the history of Africa, like the European history and where the Portuguese were trying to establish themselves on the east coast of Africa, and they were struggling with the Arabs for control of East Africa. So that's a historic thing that my mother kind of fleshed out. So that's what that book is about. It's also got some pictures of Mount Kilimanjaro. My brother Gordon and I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in 1971, like the year after the safari took place. And we actually saw glaciers up on the top and snow.
Wow.
And I, from what I understand from people that have gone up there later, a lot of that is gone. So it was kind of a privilege to see that, because Mount Kilimanjaro is almost 20,000 feet above sea level at the top. It's the highest mountain in Africa. So those are the Leaf. I mean, I've got two sequels to the book Come By Here, My Lord. One of them is kind of goes further into the dialogue between Tracy and Orwell and some of the issues that they end up having. And then is called Be Careful What You Ask For, because Orwell really wanted Tracy to come and visit him, but he didn't really know who Tracy was. Like Tracy was 15 years older than him. And Tracy came with a lot of his own baggage, and Orwell had to unpack a lot of that stuff. And so that's where that novel is about. And then the third novel in the kind of the series that I hope to publish someday is called A Dangerous Journey, where Tracy, instead of going back to Canada with his sisters, they go down to South Africa, and they take Orwell and Richard with them. They almost kidnap them and take them down there. And that was during the apartheid era. And so it talks about my remembrances of South Africa. Like I was
now, before I forget, for anybody watching, can you explain how they can get copies of your book, or are they available in libraries?
Well, the Come By Here, My Lord is available at Friesen Press Bookstore in Victoria, BC. Like it's available online there. It's also available at my website called Proudfoot Family Art. And then the first book that you alluded to called Enduring Art, Active Faith, 3 Generations Create. That's also on both of those websites, on Friesen Press Bookstore and Proudfoot Family Art. The other 2 books I've written, like Amateurs on Safari, and I wrote a book about my grandparents in Edmonton. They were here in the early 1900s, and it talks about the Spanish flu and a lot of the war and Edmonton of 120 years ago, what it was like. It's a more of a history. But
Yep.
those two books are available at PageMaster Publication Services. That's a local publisher. That's who published those two. Yeah. But the sequels to Come By Here, My Lord, Seen in a Mirror Dimly, I haven't published them yet. I'm working on them. I'm hoping to get them published, but it'll be by somebody else. It won't be by Friesen Press. It'll be at least a year before be careful what you ask for, is I would say, is out in print.
Yep.
But I'm working on it. They're
Something I try to remind writers is that when you get your books into a library, it's important to register them with the public lending right.
Yeah, I've done that. Actually, I've done that.
Okay. Great.
I wanted to say, that's one thing that's good you reminded me, like the book I just read from, as well as Come By Here, as well as my book about my grandparents and my book about Enduring Art, Active Faith. Those three books were accepted into the Capital City Press collection at the Edmonton Stanley Milner Library this summer, like in July. So they are available for public reading at that library downtown. They're
excellent.
they're also I have them registered with the National Library Service that provides books to all the libraries. So they may be in other libraries now. I know Indigo Books stores in Edmonton. We're trying to sell some of my books. And the other thing is that there's the one I wrote about my grandparents, which has a lot of historic value. You can see those books at the Edmonton Public Schools archives and library, and also at the City of Edmonton archives, because they were accepted into both of those places because they have a lot of historical stuff about City of Edmonton and about teaching Edmonton Public Schools, about the Edmonton Police Service. And a lot of this things were going on in Edmonton 120 years ago. So that's
I have a question. I hope it doesn't seem silly or anything, but by any chance, were your parents missionaries?
No, they weren't missionaries. My father worked for Canadian International Development Agency. He was the head of that delegation in Zambia from 1969 to 1973, and then he came back in the mid 1970s for another year. So he was an educator. He was an engineer. He was helping Zambia start the Zambia Institute of Technology. And like the guy that asked a couple questions there, Ken Reining, actually his father was also working with my dad. There were several Canadians that were working together to help Zambia build the Zambia Institute of Technology, which so that's what my dad did. My mother, she volunteered with the Zambia YWCA. She did a lot of teaching to Zambian ladies, especially ones that had children or mothers that were going to give birth to, she was helping them improve their skills, because some of these ladies had no husbands, and my mother was helping them through the YWCA, just providing mentoring. So those are things, and then we were involved in our church over there, and involved in but we weren't missionaries. And when I went to Nigeria to work, I wasn't a missionary. I was an I have a professional background in agroforestry.
Oh, okay.
So I was helping.
The reason I asked, I have a close friend who he was born and raised in St. Vincent to missionary parents, and some of the stories you were telling about moving around kind of sounded a bit similar to some of the stories he told me.
Yeah. So
what was your most recent trip to Africa?
My own?
Your own most recent trip. Have you been back, or?
I have not been back there since we left Nigeria in 1991.
Oh, I see.
But my brother.
What did you see change in 20 years?
What changed?
Yeah, what did you see like from 71 to 91? What did you see change in Africa, or was there significant changes?
No, I think there's been a lot of changes. I think a lot of the countries are quite modern now. Like I think when we went there in the 70s, like, a lot of people didn't have running water or telephones or electricity even, but the country was trying to introduce it,
Yeah,
or they get it supplied out all over the place. But I think nowadays it would be all over. Like there would be, it wouldn't, and they would have cell phone coverage. I think one of the things about Zambia is that it's like the president that was there when we were there, he's passed away now, but they have a better democracy, I think, than what they did. Like he was he was the president of a one-party state.
oh,
He was, and there was like he was like a dictator for life.
mhm.
So I don't think that would fly nowadays in Zambia. Like they have, I think they have a better system where they elect people like a party system.
Yeah.
And
No, I hate to cut you short, but
Yeah.
we are getting close to the end. We have
Yeah.
2 minutes. If there's anything you'd like to sum up about your book or anything you'd like to say?
Well, I wanted to thank people for tuning in, whoever did, and you could talk to me about getting copies of it. And if you want to follow me, I'm trying to get my Twitter account going, and I'm also trying to get my work out more in the public eye. So I want to write more about Africa, but I also want to write about Alberta. I have a novel that I hope to publish someday that talks about the people of Alberta. That's what I am. I'm a fourth generation Alberta Burton,
Mhm.
and I think we have quite a unique history in our province. And even today, we have quite of interesting things that stand out, and
Mhm.
sometimes good, sometimes bad. And I want to write about it. So
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I hope you mentioned me. No, I'm just kidding.
And Leaf, I wanted
I'm
to
known
thank
here.
you. Yeah, that's what I want to do, Leaf. You're from the Writers Guild of Alberta, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you're a fellow author as well.
Oh, I
So
see. Yeah.
I did want to thank you for hosting.
Oh, not a problem at all. It's been a pleasure.
It makes it a lot easier for people like myself when we're presenting to have a host.
Yeah.
So I really thank you for your work, and I hope you're successful in what you're doing. Like you've published quite a few
thank
books
you.
yourself, and so I'm hoping
Yeah.
that grows for you too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Robert, for your wonderful reading. It was a great pleasure to talk with you.
Okay. See you, everyone.